Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Meher Baba program. I'm Fred Stankus, along with my co-host Suhas Ginde. Welcome, Suhas.
Thank you.
This is the Lord Meher series program on Meher Baba. Lord Meher is a biography of Avatar Meher Baba's life. And right now we're covering the years 1932 to 1934. It's from volume 5. And in 1932, in May to June of that year, Meher Baba visited Hollywood, California, and you can imagine what was going on in the world at that time. In 1932, I think we were just getting back on our feet, the country, from the great crash of 1929. I still think we were in a depression. The 1932 Olympic Games, Summer Olympic Games, were here in Los Angeles. So there were some exciting things going on. And Meher Baba was here visiting, and I'll show a photo of him briefly in a little bit. But we're now at a time when Meher Baba was going to address several, I believe, reporters, and he was wanting to give a message about the aspect of higher consciousness, attaining such lofty places. And so, Suhas, we begin with Meher Baba in Hollywood in 1932.
Okay. Well, also happening in Los Angeles, coinciding with Baba's arrival, was the 32 Summer Olympics, which you just spoke about. 37 nations were represented with 1,500 athletes competing and close to 100,000 spectators in daily attendance. The newspapers had anticipated Baba's arrival, and at a press conference held at 1 p.m. on the day he arrived, Meher Baba gave the following message regarding the highest consciousness. So much has been said and written about the highest consciousness and God realization that people are bewildered as to the right process and immediate possibility of attainment. The philosophical mind, wading laboriously through such literature, only ends up learning a few intellectual gymnastics. The highest state of consciousness is latent in all. The Son of God is in every man, but he requires to be manifested.
Could I ask you, in your own words, the higher consciousness is latent in every man?
The highest consciousness.
The highest consciousness?
Yes.
Why don't we exhibit that?
Well, because we function through our mind, and the mind is covered up with thoughts and desires due to these impressions that it has accumulated over a period of many centuries of evolution and development.
So you're saying there's nothing wrong then in being maybe not too knowledgeable of yourself, because, we're only human.
The mind, yes, but the mind is a vehicle, and this is the reason we have to go through so many different experiences in different, so to speak, situations. And it is to clear the mind. Once the mind gets cleared of all these impressions and these thoughts and desires and wants, then the true being within us, the highest consciousness, starts reflecting itself.
So you're saying there's another real true goal that a soul or a person should have besides attaining great status in the world? In other words, you're saying attaining this higher consciousness?
Yes, not another true goal. It is the only goal, of which we already are that.
We don't know it, though.
We are not conscious of it.
So you're saying the only true goal in truth, absolute truth, is to try to attain
the highest consciousness, which is the God in all of us.
Most people don't talk about that, though. They don't
Most
even have
are dwelling in ignorance. And it's due to the fact that we are that way that the avatar descends to show us the way. So we too can clear this cluttered state. or slate in our mind.
So these are not just mere, flowery statements and words.
No.
These are an actual.
He's speaking a
maybe
truth.
you should continue and say what he continues.
Sure. And then he goes on and says the method of attaining this great consciousness must be very practical and adapted to the existing mental and material conditions of the world. The rituals and ceremonies instituted by the priest-ridden churches have made the process of attainment too dry, and that accounts for the lack of interest felt all over the world toward religious things in general.
Wow, that's quite an interesting statement in regards to too dry, meaning there's another way to pursue the truth, the higher knowledge, besides being dogmatic.
Yes, so besides being bogged down with all these rituals, ceremonies, they become dry because there's no feeling involved.
It's just a rote, yeah.
You're just doing it by action. India, in spite of its high state of spirituality, at the present moment is very caste-ridden because of the enforcement by various cults of a plethora of rituals and ceremonies which maintain the form but kill the spirit. There's no spirit behind these.
That's amazing. I love that statement. Maintain the form but kill the spirit. Mm-hmm. In India, there's there's about 30,000 Hindu deities. They represent different aspects of creation. They could even represent some of the angels that people talk about. And they're all individually like people have their individual god in Hinduism, which isn't wrong. But
it's a representation of an attribute of this power.
But Baba is saying, though,
they try to personalize
they give emphasis to the form, but lose the essence of the spirit behind it.
That's when you go to the temples and so on, and then you just go through a process, but you don't have the real inclination to get involved spiritually with your heart. It's not heartfelt, I should say. And then forms and ceremonies, instead of diminishing the ego, strengthen it. The stronger the ego, the more aggressive it becomes. And in the anxiety to become conscious of a separate self through thinking thoughts such as I am in the right, or I am the favored one, or I only have the right to live, one becomes destructive.
Well, that's so true. And look at this, what's the sister that died from India, Mother Teresa?
Yes.
She was selfless. She was truly an example of one living the life of a spiritual life, mm-hmm. to where her ego was, in fact, ground down mm-hmm. to nothing, because she didn't want to be so-called given all kind of accolades or rights and so forth. But like Baba says, these people hold their rituals and prayers and so forth as being above others, and pretty soon they get this holier-than-thou approach.
Mm-hmm. Or their ego gets strengthened.
Yes.
Because they get caught up into the ritual and ceremony.
Exactly.
Not behind that is the real essence.
Ah, that's beautiful.
So it's just the outer husk, but not the kernel of the seed. So the furious race for armaments by the Christian world, evincing an utter disregard for the commandment of Jesus, that if one cheek is smitten, the other should be offered, shows clearly what I mean by the ego.
Say that again? The furious race for arms?
Armaments by the Christian
world. That's arms, that's weapons.
Yes,
huh?
Yes, by the Christian world, evincing an utter disregard for the commandment of Jesus, that if one cheek is smitten, the other should be offered.
But not one would say, if we did that, we'd be destroyed.
Exactly. So they're not following the principles set by...
No, but what I'm saying, the rationality is, okay, if we were attacked and we turned the other cheek and the attackers attacked us, they would probably destroy us.
So that is coming from a different point of view. And that's what Baba means, shows clearly what I mean by the ego. The ego paints its own picture of what spirituality should be. So they try to make up their own world or their own concept of what he's trying to say. In the evolutionary ascent from the mineral, vegetable, and animal life, the latent mind gradually expands and develops until full consciousness is reached in the human form. To create this very consciousness, the universe emanated from the infinite ocean of knowledge and bliss namely God the Absolute. In order for God to know himself consciously, he had to create the universe. It came out of his being and goes back into his being. So in between the creation, souls are in various states of development, various states of consciousness.
So you're saying it's like waves. The first wave is ahead of the second wave, breaking it, but they're all headed for the same
They'll head
goal.
back to, waves come to the shore and then they go back. They recede.
Right.
Like ebb and the...
So we're all caught in this, we could say, turbulence of the sea or the ocean, but eventually...
But the reason creation came about is for consciousness to be developed. In the absolute state, that God was unconscious of his being. He knew nothing. He just was existence. Then, as Baba explains, when the whim arose, then latent consciousness started coming out of this being, and that's really is coming out of the nothing. And consciousness developed through the mineral, vegetable, animal stages to the human form. And then it has to go inwardly to seek its oneness with this absolute. That's the whole game. See? So that's the reason for the creation and why the universe came out. However, in the human form, with the mind fully developed, a difficulty is confronted which prophets and spiritual masters have periodically visited this earthly plane to remove. So difficulty developed, and besides the development of full consciousness in the human form as a result of previous conditions of life, the ego, the I, has evolved. This I now identifies itself with the creation or the external environment as opposed to the inner being that dwells within.
I see. So it's identifying with the external.
With the surroundings, with the environment. And it's strengthened by forms and ceremonies, rituals. It's an attempt to seek this oneness with God.
It almost described, like in an abstract sense, if an egg was dropped to the earth, a golden egg like a soul, and suddenly it takes the form of a human and looks around, it's pure as can be, but suddenly it has something that maybe touches it, and then the curiosity begins, what is this? What is that? And so that forms the ego then, those impressions of starting to comprehend what is in the world. And so that begins an individual separateness from its true self. The true self was pure, like I say, the pure bouncing baby boy or child that comes into the world, and then all of a sudden they evolve into they're looking around what's impressed by.
But it is necessary for all of us to go through this birth, living this life, dying, and then being either reborn or being one with the universe.
But each life gains more and more experiences which pile on more and more impressions, needing to, covering up that individual divinity. And so, like Baba has said, that you have to unwind all those experiences in order to attain your true self. So it's like the will of the wisp. You think you've got it, but you're adding more to it.
It's like a shadow that keeps eluding you.
Yes.
You can't catch your own shadow. See, every time you try to reach out for it.
So basically what you're saying, Baba is saying, that in the individual creation, a human being is very powerful. When you think about it, you may be in a weak position from the worldly point of view, but yet you're breathing, your blood is functioning, your heart is pumping. That is a powerful exhibit of creation, just to see a human being in existence. And then, of course, then the mind takes over, giving them impulses to do this or that. But it's an amazing, amazing thing, just the individual.
What a piece of work is man, said Shakespeare.
What a piece of work.
So the ego is composed of fulfilled and unfulfilled desires and creates the illusion of feeling finite, weak, and unhappy. Henceforth, the soul can only progress through the general suppression of this finite ego and its transformation into the divine ego.
Oh, so that's why they say leave the egos at the door.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hypothetically used when you have a brainstorming session.
Yes, otherwise you will have all kinds of arguments.
But what Baba says too, you have both fulfilled and unfulfilled desires that make up the ego.
Exactly.
In other words, you were satisfied by attaining something, but yet you have these ambitions.
Exactly. You may have unfulfilled desires, but you may also have desires that are fulfilled, but that may give you a sense of importance.
Yes.
You see, so it's still part of the ego, the result that you attain.
So I could see now when a chela or a disciple goes to a teacher or master, and he comes to them, he comes to the master and tells the master, I want to be your student. And the master knows this person's life, and he laughs somewhat, saying, how can you be my student? I know how many unfulfilled desires you still have. Mm-hmm. You know, it'd be impossible for me to take you now, almost. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
And that is why they have different types of spiritual disciplines like meditation and yoga and selfless service and so on. These are just means to wear down these desires, these
I see. So in other words, you can be given these instructions by a teacher, a master, to tell you to do various meditations.
Under his guidance.
Under his guidance, so, prayers.
If you do these things under the master's guidance, it helps in diminishing the ego. But if you do it on your own without the help of master, then it strengthens your ego and becomes stronger. And that's what happens to people that try to do these exercises without the guidance, because the love of the master is also involved in those directions.
But you hear so many people who try to meditate for peace of mind. Is that wrong?
Nothing wrong with that, but it may even strengthen the ego by someone saying, well, I as long as it says I attained this, that I is still there.
Well, but the meditation can be one of releasing, though, saying whatever can be said.
But not where it comes later on in conversation where you say, I meditated for 10 minutes over there or half an hour over here, and I achieved this.
So that
is an ego saying that.
My God, so that even strengthens the ego.
If
wow.
you just meditated and not think about it later, then it's okay, because there is no imprint left on your consciousness. You see?
But you can actually have the thought, an affirmation, I am meditating to become selfless, to become totally free of my ego. I mean, can you meditate like that?
No. You just have to meditate on an ideal that you have chosen, and usually it's your guru, or it's usually a person who's on a higher state of consciousness than you are.
So what would happen then? Their enlightenment or their love tends to wash away the aspect of your ego being strengthened?
You try in that moment to be one with that person's being or that person's consciousness.
Oh, I see. So you're losing yourself.
You're just losing thinking about yourself. About your body, your surroundings, your family, everything. You forget all that and you focus or tune. It's like tuning into a radio station on the dial. And then you have to fine tune once you get the station, because you might have static. So the mind has to get still and focused only on the master or the ideal that you have chosen, an ideal subject. That's one of the techniques of meditation. And Baba has also talked about it in the discourses on meditation, in one of the chapters.
It makes very good sense.
And there are, of course, various other techniques also, not just meditating on a form.
Right.
So it says here, through the gentle suppression of the finite ego and its transformation of the divine ego, the one infinite self, by retaining in full the consciousness of its human form. When man realizes the state of divine consciousness, he finds himself in everyone and sees all phenomena as forms of his own real self. You see, when you get to that level, we were talking about higher consciousness, you are able to see yourself.
In everyone.
In everyone. And that's what Baba says when you're on the sixth plane, you're as a saint.
Well,
which may be what you talked about Mother Teresa. She's able to see the divinity in others and not the faults and
yes. I could recall back in the 70s when I first I found out about Baba in the 60s, but in the early 70s I went through what they call a honeymoon stage of consciousness, to where I felt tremendous love for God and for everyone. And I would see people, and I would my heart would go out to them, and I almost saw myself in them. I mean, this was a brief, maybe 6 months or so. This honeymoon phase was there, but it was an amazing feeling. And so maybe that's what you're sort of like, I'm trying to describe what you said about seeing divinity in everyone.
See divinity or the divine being in everyone, but you yet have not realized that.
No.
See, that's the highest state. That's the seventh stage. And now, overcoming the ego, it goes on. Baba says the best and also the easiest process of overcoming the ego and attaining the divine consciousness is to develop love and render selfless service to humanity in whatever circumstances we are placed in. All ethics and religious practices ultimately lead to this. Loving your fellow man, doing selfless service without the thought of self, without the thought of I did this.
One of these days, maybe the Meher Baba message of, remember his symbol was mastery and servitude?
Servitude.
Where he had all the religions of the world, the major religions, all unified. And basically what he was saying was service to humanity is a way of, like what you just said, losing your ego.
Yeah, but the masters are without ego, so the only thing they can do is serve humanity. What else can they do? They don't sit around. That's why Baba did so much selfless service to humanity.
Well, his schedule was hard to keep up with.
Exactly. But that's what they do. And the more we live for others and less for ourselves, the more the low desires are eliminated. And this, in turn, reacts upon the ego, suppressing and transforming it proportionately.
Read that again. The more we live for others. How does that mean? The more we live for others. Meaning you sacrifice your own life to help others?
Exactly. Like Mother Teresa, you were saying.
It's hard to do, though, because you have to make a living.
Everyone cannot do that. But I'm saying some people have
the desire
to do more than what they have.
Maybe you could say, do some volunteer work, begin with that, and then work up further.
It starts somewhere.
But in other words, if everyone, say, did 1 hour a month, that'd be 12 hours a year. I bet you any money it would be a better place in the world.
They'd be a better person. They would be less selfish because you're reaching out to other people. The ego persists to the last, not until all the 6 out of the 7 principal states, I would say planes, on the path are traversed. Culminating in one God-conscious state is the ego completely eliminated and reappears on the 7th plane as the divine I, or the divine ego, the I am. The state of Christ consciousness to which Jesus referred when he said, I and my Father are one. That is the state where you're consciously aware of your Godhood, your conscious divinity. That's the state that Baba was in. That's the state that Jesus and all the other avatars, Ram, Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Muhammad were in.
So if our listeners are now thinking, our viewers are watching and saying, what can I do to lessen my ego? What would be some of your suggestions? I mean, these are people who are working people, who are, in a fast lane in life.
Well, one of the ways a simple way is to go to a place where it's quiet and see if you can generate love to the world and towards your fellow man. And just start somewhere. You have to think about what am I going to do next.
Oh, you mean just go someplace where you
got to start
sit
somewhere,
quietly
sit
and contemplate that.
And try to develop love out of you, coming out of you towards the world.
Towards the world.
Try to spread it like a wave.
Ah.
And it may help you stop thinking more about yourself. Saying, what am I going to do next? Or what am I going to eat? Or what am I going to work? Or what am I going to do? So those thoughts start lessening. And the more you think about others, it doesn't mean you got to start somewhere. The more you start thinking about others and spreading your love in the form of energy towards them. Maybe it's somebody who dislikes you, maybe somebody you dislike. It could be you start spreading because each and every one of us has this divine seed latent in us. So why do we have to attack that in someone else?
Well, also I'm asking, you don't have to then do something that's actual service work.
You can do that too.
But what you're saying, you could begin just with thinking about others before you have to...
In a loving way. You can also volunteer to help your fellow man. Let's say you're driving down the road and somebody has a flat tire. So if you have a jack or something, you can help. Or if somebody's battery dies and you're in a place where you have jumper cables, you can assist them and say, well, I'm busy now, I got to move on, maybe somebody else will come and help them out.
Most people do that.
So you asked me how we do that. These are some of you start by doing simple things.
I guess it's a drastic thing if you went down to the LA mission or something. That would be sort of that would be a big jump for you to go to volunteer for that.
But you have to book that like 6 months in advance. Yes.
They have that many requests.
People to go to the mission downtown, you don't walk in and start helping. People do that.
You have to coordinate.
A lot of these celebrities that go there, they are booked well in advance to do those.
I see. But what you're saying, that you could begin first of all with the thoughts of helping, sending love
vibrations,
feelings,
waves, howsoever you want to put it, towards others, towards the world in general. Just like a wave emanates when you drop a pebble, and that's the start or the beginning.
So what you're saying, it begins,
and that can lead to other things. Then you might have to take some action to help someone else who's in need.
I see.
Or who's in trouble.
So what you're saying is very simple for anyone to do. I mean, they could take.
Why make it complicated?
They could take 1 minute of their day even to think. I know if you make it complicated.
Do that when you get up in the morning. Just think about.
Or if you're in a gridlock on the 10 freeway, maybe.
Exactly. Instead of just playing the radio.
Yeah, or be on your cell phone.
Exactly. So. He says here, the state of I and my Father one, which corresponds to the state of living in the infinite and finite at one and the same time. So both God and man. That's what the avatar is. He has divine consciousness, and he also comes down to our level of consciousness so he can relate to us and functions amongst us. He lives amongst us, he plays with us.
It has to be awful powerful to be able to do that, because most souls will seek to be liberated from this because of the pull of this world.
It's the pull of Maya.
The Maya, it's so strong that it basically could take you down from this exalted state. But an avatar can both be in the world and yet be God conscious.
Out of it, because it's like poise in the midst of intense activity.
Yeah.
It's not like going and escaping from the world, because God dwells also in Maya. It's part of his creation. He also dwells in creation. He dwells amongst us. And he's impersonal because we can't see him or reach out to him. But when he manifests, he sends his prophets and messengers from time to time. These become the perfect masters. But sometimes he has to take charge of his own creation. That's when he himself descends. And that's when the Father descends as the Son, the Christ, the Messiah, the Savior, the Avatar. He comes to redeem his own creation, and he shows us the way, how we can be that which we already are.
Wow.
Covered.
That's wonderful. A good way to conclude this part 1 of our program. We'll see you next week for part 2 on the Lord Meher Volume 5, about Meher Baba being in Hollywood. Until then, remember, as Meher Baba says,
don't worry, do your best, and be happy in my love.
Thank you. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.